Welcome, football fans, to another edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones. Lloyd Vance, our very good friend, NFL Insider, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football from Sports Radio 1029 FM. The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town, part of Coastal Sports Network, joins us for a couple moments. We are brought to you by our good friends over at Play It Again Sports. And also want to remind you that this football episode, where we take a look at some quarterbacks that we think might have a breakout campaign in 2024, brought to you by our very good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Nothing like waking up in the morning to a delicious cup of coffee. You guys know I'm a big time coffee drinker, have it on the air constantly, even when I'm doing my boxing broadcast and calling basketball games as well. You got to start your day off right. And again, in the summertime, it's all about a good iced coffee or a little cold brew. And thanks to our new coffee sponsor at Fresh Roasted Coffee, you too can enjoy the delicious assortment of flavors. And it's pretty simple, right? You can just click on my show notes below and you'll save 20% off your first purchase. And the unique thing about Fresh Roasted Coffee is you can take their coffee quiz. You got to love that. You can see what blends and roast kind of match up with you and your taste buds. And as I mentioned, when you go to checkout on your order, enter the promo code BYP20 for 20% off your first purchase. I've only had 3 or 4 as we get set for this episode of BYP, and we mix in, obviously, the gambling element. But Lloyd, my friend, it's always good to talk to you. 2024 NFL season for the football fans right around the corner, and we've got our list of quarterbacks that we think will have a breakout 2024 season. And I'll hedge it with this. Some make sense, some are surprises, and one I'm going to throw out you might be a wait what Q. But with that being said, how are you, my friend?
Doing great, Q. Just doing a lot of research, getting ready for the season, man. And teams are in training camps, a lot to talk about.
All right, so let's fire it off. Now, I'll give you one. We'll go back and forth. You give me one. We'll kind of play off each other. And we don't know. This is full disclosure to the listening and viewing audience. I do not know where Lloyd's going with this. Lloyd does not know where I'm going with this. But let me give you a surprise, and you tell me right off the bat your first reaction. I'm going to go Justin Fields having a breakout 2024 season with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then I'll tell you why. But initial reaction when you hear that.
Well, I think that, you're a guy from last year. I remember you're done with Russell Wilson. So
Done.
that kind of makes sense. And he may get his opportunities, Justin Fields, because we saw already Russell Wilson had some tightness in his leg, soft tissue injury, and he was not out there in the practice field, and Fields looked pretty good. So let's see what you got.
So a couple things, right? I didn't think he got a fair shake in Chicago. We know about that coaching staff. Russell Wilson and Fields both on one-year contracts. Obviously, Pittsburgh's make the trade for Justin Fields. And the uniqueness, too, is if you go back, it's a 6th-round pick and a potential 4th-round pick if he plays 51% of his snaps. Now, I think he's going to go out and grab the starting quarterback job from Russell Wilson. You mentioned the calf, the tightness already with Russell Wilson. We know he's not cooking anymore. He hasn't cooked in years. I also believe Mike Tomlin can coach Fields up. I think they're also going to rely on their ground game a little bit. You also have Harris, who's, listen, that 5th-year option was declined, so he's going to be motivated. We know Fields in limited action, we saw with the Bears, can scramble, can throw a little bit, can move around the pocket. I think they're going to kind of use him as an RPO type of quarterback in the red zone, have some defenses kind of keep him honest and scheme for him. And I think when it's all said and done, if Justin Fields is your week 1 starter in the NFL, he should easily throw for 2,800 yards, 20 plus touchdowns, probably add 5 or 6 on the ground. That's the caveat if he takes the starting position away from Russell Wilson. Now, he might be that starter come week 3 or 4, but I believe you have more of an upside at this stage of their careers, respectively, for the younger Fields, who's just 25 years old. And again, for Russell Wilson, that's way past his prime. And both quarterbacks are on one-year contracts. So to me, I think this is basically, I'm playing for my career in Justin Fields, and I think he's going to have a breakout season because I believe he will be the week 1 starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers, or he will actually be inserted by week 3 or 4. But I don't want to hedge because we call it back your play. So I'm backing it week 1 starter, Justin Fields for Pittsburgh.
Surprise one there, Q. And there's a couple aspects you got to look at in terms of Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Tomlin has kind of said that he was going to give Russell Wilson the first opportunity to be the starter. But as you were saying, he's 35-year-old
Yep.
quarterback, and down seasons with the Denver Broncos, and before that, he just was not the same guy in Seattle. That's why they stepped away from him. Uh, it's going to be interesting because they have Arthur Smith coming there as offense coordinator. We'll see how this offense is run, but I think the Steelers, don't forget they were 10-7 last year and they had a very bad quarterback situation. So, good team, very tough division. I think this is going to be a fun one to watch, and this is going to be a camp battle. So, I'm not ready to say that Fields is a starter, but I think he's going to get his opportunities.
Hey, listen, we're back in the play. It's all about the bold predictions. All right, fire off your first quarterback.
Yeah, I think this young man is going to have a huge impact. That we saw a while ago in Washington. RG3 came in 2012. I just got to say it's rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels. I think he's going to come with the Commanders, come in there, take control of the huddle, and let's not forget last year as a Heisman Trophy winner, he completed 72% of his passes, 40 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, and then you add in the rushing yards. So he's bringing that to a Washington team. Yes, they were kind of downtrodden last year, 4-13, but I think they're going to be better in terms of their offensive production. They only scored about 19 points per game, so they're going to go a lot higher in
Yep.
terms of that regard. So he's got Eckler coming over from the Chargers to running
Yep.
back position. Zach Ertz, we'll see what he has left at tight end. Terry McLaurin's got to be, giddy just getting finally a quarterback that he can work with. Dotson there as well. And I think the big thing is offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury's coming in there. Dan Quinn, the head coach, has given him the autonomy to run his offense. And you're going to see a lot of RPOs with Jaden Daniels going to even have him on the edge. And I think he's going to have a big year in terms of making plays. Watch for him to be the offensive rookie of the year.
Yeah, and that's a good call. I mean, you're kind of high on Washington, and I'm starting to gravitate towards that opinion and insight where I believe they could be a sleeper coming out of the NFC East. And you're right, he's got the makeup, he plays the part, he looks the part, he's got the tools. I know they lost a couple weapons here and there, but you mentioned some of their wide receivers, their veteran guys. And I think the big plus is bringing in Kingsbury, right? The offensive coordinator, we've seen what he was able to do in college. Obviously, we saw what he was able to do in the pros. You've got a new head coach. You've cleaned out that toxicity that was left by Daniel Snyder. So I'm kind of on board. I tend to lean with you on Jaden Daniels, and I'm going to make a play for him, a BYP play when it comes to offensive rookie of the year. Not a bad quarterback to start things off on your side. So here's my make sense quarterback for you. And we only saw him in limited time last year in 4 games with Indianapolis. Anthony Richardson. I know he got banged up. I know he hurt his shoulder. I know he missed the rest of the season, but we saw he was averaging about 22 plus in the first 3 games. I think he's a legit dual threat quarterback. I think he can beat you with his arm. He can beat you with his legs. I think the Indianapolis Colts brass would love to see him sit more of a pocket. But from what I saw and watching him in college, Lloyd, I got the sense that he's got a little Michael Vick and a little Lamar Jackson in him. And think about this. He averaged 4 point yards on the ground, scrambling, running quarterback, if you will. I think he's going to improve on that. And I look at their offense. We know they can run the football. We know it's a track meet in that stadium, and we know they got good wide receivers. And I'm also looking at the coaching staff coaching him up. If you go by his stats, by what he only did in a handful of games, in a division where I believe the Indianapolis Colts can actually compete with the Houston Texans and CJ Stroud, there's no reason this kid shouldn't throw for 3,500 yards and have combined 30 plus touchdowns and perhaps lead the Colts into the playoffs. So I look at him where if that light goes on, he's got to take off and run. That's his first instincts, but I also think he's got a strong arm. He's a smart quarterback. Now, it's all contingent upon can he stay upright with that offensive line, but that's kind of where I'm leaning towards Indianapolis. I'm pretty high. If you got a reclamation project in Justin Fields, give me 17 games behind a good offensive line and weapons for a second-year quarterback in Richardson. And to me, I think that makes sense. I look for him to have a breakout year.
Yeah, Q, and he's a good candidate for the NFL Comeback Player of the Year award, and that's a prop bet that fans should kind of look at
Yep.
there. And I like what Shane Steichen's done with this offense. He's looking for Richardson to kind of play that role that he had Hurts doing with the Philadelphia Eagles. He reminds me a lot in terms of his style of play and his size. It reminds me of Cam Newton. You know what I mean? A guy that can run the football, throws
Yep.
the
Yep.
ball, was strong actually. Remember Cam Newton back when he was the MVP and he took the
Sure.
Carolina Panthers to Super Bowl. So
2015.
that's
Yep.
the kind of production that they're looking for in terms of Richardson. Now, that shoulder injury, he cannot take on linebackers and things of that sort.
Right. Good point.
Dynamic playmaker. And when you add him with Michael Pittman Jr. at the receiver
Yep.
position, Jonathan Taylor at the running back
Yep.
position, offensive line anchored by Quentin Nelson, there's a lot of pieces for Richardson to work with here. So I do kind of agree with you that he is in line for a breakout season, and we'll see if he's able to stay healthy. And that's going to be a fun division to watch if he can stay out there and kind of compete with Trevor Lawrence, these young guns going at it, and all as well as CJ Stroud.
I also think goal line situations look for him for the RPOs, just like I mentioned with Fields, because he's a big kid. That's a good point you brought up to kind of illustrate with Cam Newton, but hopefully he doesn't have the type of history. When Cam Newton won in 2015, that third and long against the Giants to keep the drive alive, they won that wild game. That cemented Cam Newton to win the MVP that year. Again, a football edition of Back Your Play with Q. Rich Quinones here, Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 FM. The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town. Of course, part of the Coastal Sports Network, always a contributor to Back Your Play, and certainly joins me throughout the week on Middays with Q and our other football-related sports betting shows. Yeah, I look at the ground game. I look at these wide receivers. I also think there's going to be some really winnable games. I mean, they won 9 games last year, right? I mean, with a makeshift offensive line and, mixing and matching with the quarterback position. Uh, I think he needs to understand he doesn't always have to take off out of necessity. But with that being said, again, I'm looking at some of these numbers and I just think it sets up, especially in a weaker division, where he should be able to flourish. So to me, makes sense. We agree with that. Fire off your next QB.
This guy, you may say, "Oh boy, he's already broken out," but he may jump into the MVP race if he
Uh-oh.
has the type of season that I'm thinking. Jordan Love, the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, he's getting ready to get a big contract. Obviously, he's not in camp right now. They're working that out. I think in the next week or so, that deal's going to get done. But when you saw what he did last year, finishing 4-2 in the division, that great playoff game that
Yep.
in Dallas,
Yep.
outplayed Dak. Everybody's talking about Dak as potential MVP. Outplayed him, and then the next round played pretty well against the Niners, who ended up making Super Bowl. So when I look at the Green Bay Packers, so many young pieces on this team, the youngest playoff team since 1970. So you're talking about
Wow.
Christian Watson. I know he has a hamstring injury. Romeo Dobbs, a good young receiver. Jaden Reed, a
Yep.
guy who's kind of that gadget player.
Yep.
And then you have Dontavian Wicks, a guy who's a speedster, can run all the routes. I like the offensive line with Eldon Jenkins and Zach Tom. They're two building blocks there. And then you get Josh Jacobs coming over from the Raiders. So it's a big opportunity for Love to kind of prove it that last year wasn't a fluke. And if you talk about his last 8 games last year, 70% completion percentage, 18 touchdowns, only 1 interception. So that just tells you the type of ability this guy has. And I think definitely he's going to keep the ball rolling in 2024.
You believe he can be an MVP candidate?
If the team plays their potential, LaFleur, last year they didn't get to that 13 win mark, but I
Right.
think this team is poised for that. They bring over McKinney to defensively backfield, and they have some pieces there on the defense, including Rashawn Gary at the rush end. So I think the Packers are going to have a very good season. And I think Love can jump into that MVP race if he plays the potential. And also very underrated in terms of moving the sticks. He's not known to be a runner, but he also does a lot like Mahomes does on a key third down. He will move the
Yeah.
chains when needed.
I put up their schedule. Philly, Indianapolis, Tennessee, Minnesota, the Rams, Arizona. They've got some winnable games. So if you look at, let's just say Indy, Tennessee, Minnesota, they beat the Rams. They lose to Philly to open up the season. Tough spot, even though they are at home to open up the season in a primetime affair against Philadelphia Eagles, 8:15 on Peacock. 4-1, feeling pretty good about yourself to perhaps get to 10 and 11 wins with some winnable games late. They close out against the Saints, Minnesota, Chicago. Not a bad play there for Jordan Love. All right, now my final quarterback. You're going to be I kind of dubbed this wait what, like what are we talking about here, Q? But Justin Herbert. So You go ahead. Instant reaction. Go ahead. You were about to say, wait, what?
Now, a lot of people, I know my son always says he's overrated. He hasn't got it done, but I think a lot of it has to do with Brandon Staley not being there anymore. And now you have Harbaugh driving this young man.
Yeah, so 13 games last year, right? 26-year-old gunslinger. This is the numbers. Over 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns to 7 picks. He was sacked 29 times. Obviously, they remedied that in the offseason when they drafted Alt coming out of Notre Dame with the number 5 pick in April's draft. You mentioned Harbaugh. I think they're going to be +3 in the win column because of Harbaugh. You know he's going to ride the quarterback. He understands the quarterback position. You've got Gus Edwards. You've got veteran backs, J.K. Dobbins coming off a bad ACL injury. They want to prove they're still really good backs. And their weapons, too. Think about this. McConkey, the kid coming out of Georgia, close to 900 yards in college. I think he's going to be a player that's going to stretch the field. They're ready on the same page. Number one option for Herbert. You got Quentin Johnson. I believe he's going to step up. He had a tough rookie season. Look for him to stretch the field. Look to him to emerge as a guy that's probably going to have 700 yards, maybe 6 or 7 touchdown receptions. Use him, the big body, the good hands in the red zone. I didn't even get into the tight ends. And I think to your point, it goes to Harbaugh. I look at Herbert. We already know the numbers he put up. I mean, in 2021, he threw for 5,000 yards, 5,014 yards. We know he's a gunslinger. You add those running backs where you got to keep the run defense honest. You open it up a little bit. You got Harbaugh. They're going to want to sling it. My projections, this is me. If this team wins 9 to 10 games and they're right there for a wild card spot, I can see his stats over 17 games projecting to 5,500 yards and 35 plus touchdowns. Now, he might throw 15, 16, 17 picks, but if they win 9 or 10 and secure a wild card spot, Harbaugh's most likely going to be coach of the year, and Herbert's pretty much going to be right there in the MVP race. And right now, he's sitting at plus 1,400. So he is my third and final quarterback to watch to have a breakout campaign in 2024.
This is going to be a fun team to watch because let's not forget last year, 5-12, they finished last in AFC
Yep.
West.
Yep.
And Harbaugh is bringing in, the great elixir coming from college. He's bringing that energy. He's going to turn this team around. They already have Sean Slater, who I really like on the offensive line. You've talked about all coming over. They got to have some help from Gus Edwards, the running back
Yep.
position, and Dobbs as well. So they're going to try to establish that running game, and that will only help what Herbert does because he's also a dual threat guy. He can move
There we go.
around and he'll move the chains as well running the football. So it's going to be fun to watch. And I kind of agree with you that he's in line for a big season.
It's a football edition of Back Your Play with Q. Rich Quinones here. Lloyd Vance joining us. Don't forget, we are on Spotify, Amazon Music, Podchaser, also the YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q, part of Leon Media Network. Lloyd Vance does a great job. Host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Sports Radio 1029 FM. The game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town, Coastal Sports Network. You catch him every Monday night live from 8 to 9. And with the NFL season right around the corner, our breakout quarterbacks. I know you got one or two to throw back at me. See if I kind of swing them back at you. So fire off.
Yeah, I was thinking about my next one. I definitely have to go with first overall pick in the draft, Caleb Williams. I think, this is another young man. He's going to compete with Jaden Daniels for that offensive rookie of the year. And there's nowhere to go up for the Bears team. Yes, the Bears last year 7-10 won some games surprisingly that a lot of people said, okay. I thought they would be worse, but than 7-10. But Eberflus is on a hot seat,
Right.
and Williams is coming in there, and he's got Shane Waldron as the new offense
Yep.
coordinator. He's got that Seattle pedigree. They had so many great years with Russell Wilson. And then, the Bears have given him so many weapons in terms of DJ Moore had 1,000 yards last year. You bring Keenan Allen over,
Yep.
Rome Dunzier, another great young rookie. You got to watch him. The tight end Cole Clement is very underrated. A lot of people don't talk about his ability. He scores a lot of touchdowns. I like DeAndre Swift coming over, and then they have a couple other running backs. So I think, Williams, as long as he's protected along that offensive line that's had some question marks, I think he can have a very big season and kind of break out.
Yeah. To me, I thought it was kind of obvious, right? Because rookie coming in, and listen, not to take away from the hard work you do with your due diligence and your research, that offense is stacked. But I'm not a big Williams fan. I didn't like him too much in college, and I I'm not a fan of the head coach, and I think that might be an issue. Like, I want to see this kid when they struggle and he has a 8 of 23, buck 65. How's he going to react? I mean, you can't cry. It's the NFL, man. Like, you can't. Now, he's talented, don't get me wrong, and they did a good job of giving him weapons. What's a rookie quarterback's best friend, right? A good ground game, tight ends, you got some wide receivers. If I were to back you in a corner right now, give me your projection stat wise. If he plays a full 17, forget about wins and losses for the Bears, but the offense is in sync. What kind of numbers do you project for Caleb Williams?
Sure, I think he needs to kind of have a goal of like 25 touchdown passes, not more than 10 interceptions. We know that a young quarterback, they struggle. You know, everybody
Yeah.
talks about Peyton Manning leading the league in interceptions his rookie season. So all the coverage is going to be a lot different for him because it was so easy in college when he was winning the Heisman Trophy and SC putting up all his points. Uh, but I do think that he's going to be able to protect the football. And the key thing is Eberflus, as you were
Yep.
saying, is he going to get is he going to be tight? Because everybody knows he's on a hot seat and will Williams be able to save his job? But Williams is going to be there no matter what. And it's going to be fun to watch him with all those weapons.
Oh, 28, 3,000 yards, 2,800, 3,000 yards.
Yeah. If you can get to 3,000 yards passing, that'd be right. You know, it's 17 game season. That's going to mean he's protecting the football. And
It's
let's
a
not
buck
forget,
80. You're throwing for a buck 80 a game, right?
yeah. And the Bears, let's face it, in their history, they've been searching for a franchise quarterback for such a long time. He's going to get his opportunities. He doesn't have to look over his shoulder like some of these other quarterbacks that we've talked about in the past. And it's going to just be fun to see, can he live up to all the hype? But, you know, being in that number one pick, the bullseye is on his back.
All right. Now, I know you mentioned you have one more. I'm going to take a stab at guessing this one more, and it's probably quarterback. Is it a young quarterback?
He's fairly young, but he's been around a couple of years.
Oh, he's fairly young and he's been around for a couple years. I mean, logic would say Trevor Lawrence.
No, I'm not going to go with Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, it's not going to be Bryce Young. So, man. All right, let me have it. Go ahead. Fire. Who you
I'm
got?
going to go with the Cardinals quarterback, Kyler Murray. You know, he's
Video
going to
game
get his
Kyle.
opportunities. Huh?
Video game Kyler.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what the offense coordinator Petzing could do with him. And, you know, he's coming off that ACL. He's going to put up some stats. If you're talking about in terms of can he have a rebound season, I think he's going to put up big numbers. Try to get back to that 2020 on form where he threw for over 3,700
Yeah.
yards, 24 TDs, only 10 interceptions that year. And this year he's getting Marvin Harrison Jr. What an explosive player coming
Yep.
in the
Yep.
door. And I think that's going to help him. So seems to be very healed from that ACL from December. I think he's going to be able to run again. And you're going to see the same old Kyler. So I'll have him as one of my breakout guys.
They were fourth in the NFC West. Now, the schedule makers were not kind. They open up on the road against Baltimore, my Chargers, Detroit, Washington, San Fran, Green Bay. That's that's brutal. Pardon me. Let me fix that. Hold on. Let me check that. They have the Chargers later, but they have the Rams. So they open up against Buffalo, the Rams, Detroit, Washington, San Fran, Green Bay, Los Angeles, and Miami. That's a brutal schedule. They were fourth in the NFC West. You want to walk that back, Lloyd Vance? If they can get through that unscathed, do you believe Arizona? And I know we'll save our predictions as we drop more episodes of Back Your Play. Um, I feel as though people, if they can get through that part of the schedule unscathed and win some ball games, and he's putting up numbers, then that tells me they're going to compete in the West, and maybe they're going to compete for a potential wild card spot. But whew, you want to
Yeah,
walk that back, or you're backing your playoff
yeah, it's a
Murray?
gauntlet. But I'm almost looking at it in terms of fantasy football.
There,
You know what I mean? He's going to have a good fantasy football. So he's going to put up some numbers. And that's what I was looking at in terms of his
that's
breakout
fair.
now. The Cardinals, it's going to be tough for them because they have the Niners, they got the Rams in that division, and that schedule you just pointed out is brutal.
Hey, that's great stuff as we start to wrap up This edition of Back Your Play with Q, powered from our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. And of course, Played Against Sports, 1450 Clemens Spitz Road in Deptford, New Jersey, for all your used sports equipment and more. You and I will be dropping a lot more shows as we start to look at defensive side of the football, perhaps NFL head coaches and their odds to win head coach of the year. We'll do some player props, and then we have to get into our pretty much our predictions, but we've got a couple more weeks before the season is underway. August 1st, by the way, Hall of Fame. So we'll get a little taste of Caleb Williams, we believe, Chicago against Houston. But as always, you can follow Lloyd on X at Lloyd Vance, social media platforms. Give him a follow, does a great job. Host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football and Sports Radio 1029 FM. The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town. Part of the Coastal Sports Network. Always kind enough to join me during Middays with Q. And of course, Back Your Play as we put another episode in the books. And as we like to joke and say, if you say it, you have to play it. And Lloyd, if you do that, you back it and you stack it and you put a little coin in the pocket. Always appreciate you jumping on board, my friend. Excellent insight on the quarterbacks and which ones we believe will have breakout campaigns in 2024. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Talk to you later.